7:38, Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Welcome on in. Scott DesJarlais, Congressman Scott DesJarlais. Appreciate you joining us. I'm assuming you're in Washington, D.C., because the Republicans going to have another crack at trying to find a speaker. So let's talk a little bit about this. Congressman, tell me about how the Republicans are all getting along right now. They're in the House of Representatives, because word is that there's some warring sides going on right now.
Yeah, I mean, we're a very diverse conference, and I think that the strategy that we've been using is not working, so we need to come together and find a strategy that will work. They've tried. Of course, we had Speaker McCarthy, who on October 3rd was putting appropriation bills on the floor, and some folks decided that they would vote with 208 Democrats and have him removed. And once that happened, that was what we were dealt with. So we went about picking someone new. Steve Scalise was the choice of the conference. Inside a room, you only have to get the majority of the votes. He did. But it was clear that if we took it to the floor, he was not going to have 218. So after some wrangling, he decided to withdraw his name. We went to a second vote. Jim Jordan, who I know you like and who I like, I voted for in 2015 against John Boehner. So Jim and I go back a long ways. I think he's a great communicator, is a good conservative. But it appears that our conference either has some trust issues, maybe he's too conservative for some of the moderates in our party. Whatever the reason, through two rounds of votes, he can't get beyond 200. I think we're going to try another vote today around noon. I suspect that the outcome is going to be about the same, so we'll be back to the drawing board, and we go within our conference, and we try to find out if there's a consensus candidate that everyone can get behind. And, this is becoming pretty painful. It's about 3 weeks now where we're not legislating, we're not doing appropriate bills, we're not doing committee work, and so hopefully today something gives.
So I keep reading these stories, Congressman Scott DesJarlais, about how there's a lot of anger and frustration with the supporters of Jim Jordan, whether it's constituents calling lawmakers who are on the fence or maybe no votes for Jordan. And I'm reading stories about the wives of lawmakers getting really nasty text messages from supporters, and a lot of heavy-handed tactics being used. From your vantage point, have you heard about that, and what has the reaction been on Capitol Hill?
I mean, clearly, yes, it's happening. I've seen it. I know the people that it's happening to. And so, again, there's like Club for Growth, for example. They were scoring this vote, which means, I have a great score with Club for Growth. I have a great score with Heritage. I'm considered very conservative. But people like Don Bacon in Omaha, or people in New York or other places that Biden actually won their districts, their scores are already terrible anyway because they vote less conservatively than I do or we do in red states. So honestly, that threat to them didn't mean much, but yet it was still a threat. And that, yes, there were people who were getting calls. We have an ophthalmologist from Iowa who was actually getting legitimate death threats that she had to turn over to the Capitol Police. So people get fired up and they call in, if you don't vote for Jim Jordan, we're going to primary you. And most people who get here are fairly headstrong and maybe somewhat stubborn. So, I don't know how you react to bullying, but you probably kind of bow up and say, I'm not going to take this. So that has been going on. That's clearly very unhelpful. It's not uniting. And, we as a conference have to decide what a win is. We knew when we had a slim majority that we basically had three jobs, and that was to investigate, which we've been doing. We got to block the Biden agenda, which we can do. And, we've got a message. And so our job was pretty simple, is 1/3 of the process, and then we go into 2024, which is just a year from now. And we hope that the American people want conservative leadership in the White House so we can, close the border, so we can fix the economy, energy independence, be hard on crime, all those things we want to do. But right now we're kind of at a standstill. So, you go back and look at what started this. I told you, I think when I was on your show before, if taking out Speaker McCarthy turns out to be the right move, and we get someone like a Jim Jordan in there, and we're rocking along, doing a better job, I'll come on your show and say, I was wrong. The 8 people who did that were correct. But right now, going and doing that without a plan B or something certain was probably a little reckless right now. And I think we'd be in a better place if we still had the original speaker. I think I would love to see what Jim Jordan can do as speaker, but I don't think that's going to be reality.
Well, and So you brought it up, right? So I always talk about how politics is, like a game of chess. You've got to think a couple of steps ahead. Obviously, people weren't thinking a couple of steps ahead, and so um, what is the plan? I mean, Jordan keeps getting fewer and fewer votes the more times you guys take a vote. So, I mean, at some point, you're going to have to figure out another strategy. You started the call talking about how you guys need to find another strategy. Well, I hate to say this, but I mean, the only strategy that seems like it would work, and I don't want you folks to do this, but it's to work with the Democrats to find a leader. But the person that they're going to choose is certainly not going to be a Jim Jordan.
No, and that's part of the problem. But in Washington right now, there's an old saying, the tail wags the dog. Well, really, it's kind of the tip of the tail wagging the dog in both parties. The difference between the Democrats is they unite behind, whether it's Nancy Pelosi or Hakeem Jeffries, they hold together. I guess conservatives tend to be more the stubborn type I'm talking about. And, we have 8 or 10 people in our conference that just won't yield to any other concept. But as you say, being basically paralyzed like we are now is a bad look. So Patrick McHenry, who nobody knows a lot about other than he wears a bow tie, I've known him for 13 years. He's our Speaker Pro Tem. There's a motion to give him more powers as Speaker Pro Tem. So if we had to bring a piece of legislation to the floor, which I want to talk about if we have a minute, in terms of that $100 million and $100 billion that Biden has proposed, I want to talk about that if I can. But if we put him in place, say it's till January 3rd, till after the first of the year, we could start moving again. We could actually start doing our appropriation bills again. We could possibly get the farm bill going. So if that's what it takes, Patrick's not a moderate. He's pretty middle of the road Republican, and if we can unite behind that concept, I think most Republicans would vote in favor of that. Probably some of the hardcore conservatives would not. They'll go to the grave dying trying to get Jim Jordan in there. But if that's what we need to do to stop the paralysis and function for at least, if nothing else, the next few months, then maybe that's an option we need to look at. I've not seen the details of that to say whether I can support it or not. But ultimately, I think something like that's going to happen either later today or tomorrow. And if it would be maybe with a few Democrats, but I think it would still be with the majority of Republicans.
Congressman Scott DesJarlais is joining us. So, let's talk about the aid package. Let's take the $100 million for the people of Gaza first. Very controversial. The families of hostages are actually now coming out and criticizing the Biden administration for basically giving this $100 million or this $100 million aid package to Hamas.
Yeah, and this is going to be hard to talk about in a few minutes because really, we have the $6 billion that went to Iran that can only be used for humanitarian reasons, which in your household, you probably have a budget and you take care of things. But if someone infuses a bunch of cash and says you can only use this for food and groceries, you can say, okay, I'll only use this for food and groceries, but I'm going to use the rest of my money to go to Vegas and gamble.
Yep.
Well, Iran, getting $6 billion and being told you can't use this for anything but humanitarian, okay. And then they spend all their other money supporting terrorism. $100 million going into Palestine to help refugees seems like a humanitarian thing to do. But remember, Gaza is controlled by Hamas. And are there innocent Palestinians living there? Probably. But the government that they function under is controlled by Hamas. So that money obviously is not going to go to the Palestinians there. It's going to be controlled by the bosses, which is Hamas. And so it's foolish to think that cash is going to get to where it belongs, or some of it might. Trucks loads of water or food might get to where it's supposed to go, but same thing. They've got tens of thousands of Hamas soldiers that are in tunnels that it's going to go to first. So that's a stupid idea. Why is Egypt and Jordan not allowing refugees? We have 7 million people flooding across our border. They need to form refugee camps to let the innocent Palestinians flow from Gaza. The obvious place would be Egypt. They could take refugees into Jordan. They could put camps in southern Israel. But nobody wants to take refugees. Yet here, Biden has a flashing sign, everybody's welcome, and we are getting terrorists crossing our border. We're catching them daily. They're coming from Afghanistan. They're coming from Gaza. They're Palestinians. They're Iranians, Chinese. They're coming across our border. So then Biden now is wanting, and you may not have heard this, he wants $100 billion, not $100 million for humanitarian, but $100 billion to go through the Senate now, and they're going to try to send that to the House. That's why we need to be functioning. And I think $10 billion of that is supposed to go to Israel, and then a large amount of it goes to Ukraine, probably to build electric car factories in Kyiv. Who knows with Biden? And the thing is, we've got to secure our border. I don't have a problem with helping our allies militarily, but we are being invaded at the southern border. We are having 100,000 people die every year from fentanyl. The news likes to cover tragedy around the world. 2,000 people are dying here every day from fentanyl because of our unsecured border. We're going to be attacked by terrorists. So before anything is appropriated for other countries, we need to first establish here in Congress that money has to go to secure our southern border. Trump wanted $10 billion over 10 years to build the wall. Couldn't get that. Biden's really ready to give $100 billion to other countries to secure their border. So anyway, I'm a little pissed off about that, and we need to get a speaker in our House so we can address this money and take care of business at home, and then we can talk about helping our allies.
Well, the $100 billion, I do know about that. You're going to have about $10 billion for Israel. But in my reading, you're going to have about $10 billion for Israel. You're going to have a little bit for Taiwan, and then you're going to have all this money for Ukraine. And the thing that, since we're throwing around the P word, what pisses me off is it sounds like this whole thing is going to be almost like, just for description, an omnibus spending bill, right? If you want to give Israel $10 billion, then you've got to agree to give, Ukraine $70 billion. And that's part of what I believe is the frustration with Washington, D.C., is I don't believe that $60 to $70 billion for Ukraine, I don't necessarily believe that would pass on its own. But $10 billion for Israel would. But it's all crammed together in this one package. This is part of what's wrong with Washington, D.C.
Yeah, well, where these big rounded numbers come from, $10 billion, I want to know what Israel's asking for. They're a well-equipped country. What do they need? Tell us what you need, and we can appropriate it. Let's not just pick a number and give it to you. And that's the rounding errors in Washington are astounding. I did hear that Biden was throwing in some border security, but if you dig deeper on that, he wants to send a bunch of that money to sanctuary cities like New York and Chicago who can't deal with the few immigrants that were sent their way. And the other thing I heard is he wants more asylum lawyers. So these people coming in, they're not going to stop them from coming in. They're going to help them get citizenship more efficiently. So he wants more attorneys at the border to help these people get into the country. And so don't be misled by the money that he's claiming is going to go to border security. It's not security. It's facilitation.
Well, it's processing. They want to process them in as fast as possible as they continue to import an entirely new voting bloc. 7:52 on WTN. Congressman Scott DesJarlais, we've got about 60 seconds. Do you have a prediction as to what's going to happen today at noon?
I think at noon, the vote for Jim Jordan is going to be similar to the last 2 days, plus or minus 4 votes. And at that point, I guess it's up to Jim whether he's going to throw in the towel and say, I can't get there. Then we'll go back to conference. We'll see if there's somebody within the conference that we can unite behind. But I'm guessing that a couple people have been talking about dropping this resolution on the Speaker Pro Tem, expanding those powers. So I wouldn't be surprised if we get to take a look at that and see if it's something that can at least get us moving forward until we can solve the problem that was created here 2-3 weeks ago.
Is there a name, Congressman, that you believe would be amenable to all parties?
Well, I've thrown out the name Lee Zeldin, and he served with us for a lot of years. He went and ran for governor of New York. He frankly got us the majority of his coattails in New York, got 4 Republicans elected in normal Democrat seats, and they're here amongst us now. He came way closer to beating the incumbent there, maybe 5 points, and Lee Zeldin's a good guy. And so if we had to go outside the conference, I think that he's somebody that can unite us. There's, Tom Emmer may come up, but you start getting into the same establishment things. I think the Freedom Caucus faction, they think Jim Jordan is the hill we need to die on. And so if they're not willing to budge there, then we're going to have to find some kind of a compromise solution. And I hope we don't have to work with Democrats. If there's some moderate Democrats that go along with the Patrick McHenry strategy, I don't know if I can vote for it or not, but I'm going to keep an open mind because I know what we're doing now just is futility, and we keep repeating this cycle.
Yeah.
And I heard you earlier in the show. it's not a good look for us right now. We got to solve this problem, and we need to do it in a hurry.
Well, and Hakeem Jeffries is out there saying, minority leader, he's out there saying that he would be amenable to the Patrick McHenry solution. He is not amenable to anything that involves Jim Jordan. And I going to the Democrats, that is going to be a big slap in the face for the people in Tennessee and people across America who went to the polls to make sure that we had a conservative majority in the House. Then why are we having to, go to the Democrats to do whatever we want to do? And that includes finding a speaker. So the whole thing is just frustrating, and it's been frustrating to watch and cover. But I appreciate you letting us in on what's going on and what is expected perhaps later on today. Thank you very much, Congressman Scott DesJarlais.